We sent a signal out like a flare in the night, and not just in the realm of our own time-space, our own solar system, our own galaxy, and our own universe, but elsewhere, out into the nether regions of parallel universes and lateral dimensions that exist at different frequencies right beside us, and indeed, right through the very space our bodies occupy, as atomic structure tells us that we are largely empty within the spinning structure of an atom. We basically said to everything that we're here and we're destructive and we pose a threat to everything around us. Then everything changed, including our economy, because an economy is really nothing more than a series of exchanges, and Roswell opened up new markets. Atomic then nuclear weapons might be the stupidest thing the human race has done in a long list of stupid things. Fortunately for us, not all races in the multiverse and in this universe are as stupid or devoid of compassion as we seem to be most of the time. The extraterrestrial races that came into our time-space after the atomic testing had the ability to move within our timeline once they were in our time-space. We now have no idea what is real and what's not real in our past. We don't know if the ancient alien theory is correct. It's everywhere now if you're paying attention. Our gods were aliens. There is some truth to this, but a lot of it is the result of tinkering with our timeline and laying breadcrumbs in our past that didn't exist before the extraterrestrials who came after the atomic testing. Think about it like a computer network. A single computer network might not know other networks exist outside of it if it's a closed network. Now imagine a hacker or a group of hackers getting inside that network. What could they do? Almost anything. They could change documents and they could change the database. This is basically what happened after Roswell. You'd be amazed how similar an experimental realm is to a network. The physical body is the physical network and the astral plane is the transfer of data and the database is the Akashic record. Remember when I said most things human beings do are a metaphor for something that already exists? It's like that. How much of us is universal and how much of us is species related? Is beauty a universal principle? Do all species regard beauty the same way? If that's the case, then why are so many of these extraterrestrials hideously deformed? Why do they not respect what we respect in terms of beauty? Have they been able to produce a Beethoven, a Mozart, a Dostoevsky, a Shakespeare? How do they procreate? How long do their children spend with them before they are independent? What is the gestation period for an Andromedan mother? Do they get sad? Are we the only race with a heart? Are the aliens here as mentors? Are they here to trade? What is a galactic economy? One would assume that all planet-born sentient beings in the universe would have everything they need to thrive on their planets just as we do, or they would never be able to get to the point where they can travel in space. If they have everything they need on their planets, why are they going into space? What is it that they're trading and what is it that they're looking to get? What is galactic commerce? Why don't we know anything about alien culture? Whatever happened as a result of the technology and experiments and deployment on Nagasaki and Hiroshima? Our world changed after World War II. A secret world grew out of the National Security Act. Groups were formed that are unaccountable to the public. Whether they accurately report their work to congressional subcommittees is questionable as well. Rumors of technology transfers between extraterrestrial races and we human beings abound. Its popular name is the Secret Space Program. What does this have to do with economy, you might ask? All relationships pivot off of exchanges. Economy is the fundamental rule of dualistic realities. We can assume that if extraterrestrial races contacted us here on Earth, that they are also familiar with and living within dualistic realities, and, therefore, bound to the same rules of exchange. Even China, long referred to as the Hermit Kingdom before they opened up in the 70s and 80s to Western visitors and diplomacy, traded with neighbors for centuries through the Silk Road. Exchange is a fundamental principle.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I am Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. This is Event Horizon Part 3. And as you can tell by the excerpt that was read from the chapter, You can see how it begins to tie the book together and bring all the themes together. So there's a lot to go on. I mean, even though I wrote the book, sometimes I can hardly hold it all together in my head. It's so expansive. But this is what happened, okay? We had an event in 1947 that, or thereabouts, that introduced into our timeline, let's say, forces that were capable of manipulating that timeline. And now human beings are on the timeline as well, or they were for quite some time. So where is this all leading? How are our governments going to make us aware of these things? What plans are there for disclosure, if any? I mean, the list goes on and on of questions that you might have. So, as I like to do in the event horizon, because it is a summation of the body of the book, the thesis of the book. And remember, the thesis of the book is wrapped with my personal story. 3 chapters in the beginning and 3 chapters in the end are mine. And they talk about my life growing up and the ancestral trauma that I had to deal with, and then where I'm at in my life now, and how when you break free of these forces, you have an almost unimagined liberation in your life. I want to say also that the only life worth living is a life that is of service to other human beings and to all sentient beings in the life field that is present in this 3-dimensional reality we live in, called planet Earth and our solar system. I suppose if you have the consciousness, you could extend that equanimity even to the races in the 4th dimension and the beings in the 4th dimension, many of whom, around the Earth anyways, are human, out of body, waiting for incarnation, but human. So this is a grand tale in The Devil and Us, a memoir of you and me. What I'm trying to say in this book is epic. I'm trying to tell it in a story. There's a lot of information, but it is a story. And I did that because story is the way human beings digest information. And this is the reason for time. In time, things have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Time is an illusion, but it is a reality while we're in this 3D matrix, this 3D hologram, which I think is a divine hologram. I mean, it's part of the God field. And it's been tinkered with, and it's vibrationally, or it was vibrationally controlled, largely from the moon. All of these things you've heard are true. The only thing I'm doing that is at all new is giving it a context that, to the best of my understanding, nobody up until this point has done. Merging the scientific, the magical, the spiritual, the physical, the material, and the non-material, and bringing it all into one narrative thread, and showing you how the last 144 years, 1880 to 2024, have been the execution of a plan. This should be manifest to you now. If you're watching the news these days, you will be fully aware of the fact that you are being governed by forces that have no regard for you anymore. At a municipal level, the police are not protecting. At a state level, or a provincial level, if you're in the Commonwealth, the governments are not protecting. And at a federal level, the governments have basically folded into an undeclared international structure. And it remains undeclared because the vast majority of people would not go along with it. The push to globalization was the plan of the secret societies, coming off of the Kabbalah for the most part. This push for control of the world has been an ideal of the Zionists since their inception, which far predates Theodore Herzl. It is a complete misdirection to suggest that Theodore Herzl in the late 1890s is the beginning of Zionism. It begins with Sabbatai Levi in 1666. It begins with the proliferation of the secret societies who begin to study the treasure trove of magic and metapsychology that was in the possession of rabbinical circles, which had been darkened by exposure to it. The material, to my sensibilities, is radioactive to human beings. It's psychically and spiritually radioactive and deteriorates our spiritual capacities. This necessitates at this point a brief explanation of the material, the psychic, and the spiritual. So the material is what we all experience. It's waking up every day. It's eating food to sustain the body. It's sleeping to rest the body. It's making love to procreate. It's working to gain the credits to buy the things you need. This is all part of the material reality. The psychic reality is muted by a dominant material reality. So to become more psychic, you have to become less material. It's my opinion that to fully accentuate your spiritual nature, you have to circumvent the psychic, because the psychic has its own pitfalls. And there are countless people out there now teaching and passing information on, and they do so under the flag of spiritual teaching, but it's really psychic teaching. It's part of the dual worlds. It's not connected to the unconditional love. And it's this unconditional love, this empathy for everything around you, that denotes the spiritual within you, which we could characterize as the soul. The soul could also be characterized as an individual unit of perception. So that individuality, if the cycle is completed and you're able to merge back into the whole, that individuality is preserved for eternity. Okay, it doesn't mean that you are the personality that you are now, because we have all been many personalities through incarnations. We've been everything. We've been mineral, we've been plant, we've been insect, we've been marine life, all of the marine life, we've been all of the mammals, we've been everything in the life cycle here. And it's embedded in the deoxyribonucleic acid of the human being, which, if you understand these game, and this is the moment in history in which we come to understand whether or not the cult is going to succeed and take over the human race. They're already very strong. They're already in many sectors of society. They've already commandeered most of the institutions. In fact, I will be so bold as to say all of the major institutions in the first world have been taken over by the cult. And that means they are working now to degrade human beings. And they're doing so within the capacity of the institution, whether it be medicine, education, justice, or what have you. They're working in the reverse polarity. This is the great inversion of the Sabbateans. Sabbatai Levi, you can look him up. He was declared the Messiah in 1666. These Jews are always declaring their Messiah. They say their Messiah is close to coming now. Perhaps it's true. I suspect that the prophecy or the manifestation will have to occur because so much psychic energy has been trapped in these mind control systems, and human psychic energy is manifestation energy. So essentially, if you're not conscious of what you're doing and you conscript yourself to a faith, whether it be Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, then you are in some way conscripting your manifestation ability to the designs of these cult figures. Very difficult thing for people in these religions to accept, but it is true. And now we are in the end game. And what is going on in the end game? Nobody is taking care of us. Nobody is taking care of the southern border. Justin Trudeau is destroying the Canadian economy to weaken the population so that there's no resistance to whatever he wants to bring in. The southern border in the United States is completely corrupted. Military forces are being brought in through the border. This is a coordinated effort, and it's all part of the centralized planning of the cult, which at its core is the cooperative force of Nazis and Zionists, which contradicts everything in our popular culture for the last 80 years, 79 years, since 1945 until now. Okay? So they're working together. This should be manifestly clear to you now. And isn't it not interesting that we're finding the Nazi regalia popping up in so many different places, sort of accidentally introducing itself into the consciousness stream? Now remember, disclosure comes in many forms. You should pay close attention to anything that comes into the consciousness field, whether it's declared fiction, cinema, novel, video games, television shows, anything that comes into the consciousness space of human beings now is in some way, shape, or form a disclosure. So what is the disclosure that we're getting now? Well, we're certainly getting the disclosure that an alien invasion is underway. This is a coordinated alien invasion that has been cooperatively facilitated by the cult members. And it will not be Independence Day with Will Smith. It will not be a physical phenomenon. This is what is confusing people. It will be much more like a traditional spiritual phenomenon, which is the co-opting or the taking over of the human bodies, ergo possession. But it's not demonic possession, it is alien possession. You can find all kinds of people, incidentally, bragging about it now on YouTube channels, claiming they are hybrids. They are various forms of hybrids. The abduction program, which began in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, was facilitated with the cooperation of our governments in the NATO-allied countries. That's why abduction does not occur in Eastern Europe. It doesn't occur as much in Africa. There are stories about it in Argentina, coincidentally, but who went to Argentina? The Nazis. Okay? But their principal stronghold now is embedded right into the operating system that is governing the world. It's embedded right into the finances. The Nazi forces are in part responsible for the collapse of our economy now. So, what is the end game in the simplest possible terms? Let's take a look at this and see what we make of this.
We don't know why he turned to atheism. These poems that he wrote that were pans to Mephistopheles, is that after he becomes an atheist?
No, he's writing, so the first one was 1837, wrote another in 1841. He wrote a bunch of them.
Right.
He did just a chilling play called Ulanem.
Yes.
Oulanem. And people that are watching this, if they now type into their computer Ulanem, even in Google, it'll pop up, play by Karl Marx.
Yeah.
It even has a Wikipedia entry. And let me warn people, you might not want to do this, but if you click the images button, you will see, there's some satanic stuff up there from like, not heavy metal, but like black metal groups. So Ulanem is an anagram for Emmanuel or Emmanuello.
Right.
So Marx takes Emmanuel, which is the name given to Christ, or Manuelo, and he flips it into this anagram called Ulanem. And it's this chilling play. The main character is Lucindo,
yeah.
Lucindo, And you just can't believe what you're reading with this play.
Mm-hmm.
So that was written later in the 1840s. So really, the prime of his writing, including the decade when he wrote the Communist Manifesto, is also the same decade when he was writing these poems
And plays.
and plays.
Yeah,
And throughout his life, his kids and others would say, he had a favorite line always from Mephistopheles.
Right,
Everything that exists
right.
deserves to perish. So that remains a part of him throughout his life. His son, Edgar, has a letter where he addresses his father as "my dear devil," which I don't know. Maybe it's playful. I don't know.
Yeah.
Although I would never, call my dad "my dear devil." His wife called him "my wicked knave." I quote Henrik Heinzen, referring to him as a goblin who tried to take me under his spell. Other cases of where he's using that kind of language. When Engels first met him, he describes him as this dark man from Trier, who hops and leaps and springs on his heels. The monster of 10,000 devils, he describes him. And the letter from his father is, which was written in 1837, a year before his father died. So his father writes to him, March 2nd, 1837. Carl, at times my heart delights in thinking of you and your fortune, and yet at times I cannot rid myself of ideas which arouse in me sad forebodings and fear when I am struck as if by lightning by the thought, is your heart in accord with your head, your talents? Has it room for the earthly but gentler sentiments which in this veil of sorrow, it's a beautiful letter in many ways, are essentially consoling for a man of feeling? And then this question from the father of Karl Marx to his at this point, 18-year-old son. And since that heart, Karl, is obviously animated and governed by a demon, not granted to all men, is that demon heavenly or Faustian? Will you ever, and that is not the least painful doubt of my heart, will you ever be capable of truly human domestic happiness? And this doubt has no less tortured me since I have come to love a certain person like my own child. Will you ever be capable of imparting happiness to those immediately around you? By the way, the answer was no, right?
Well,
but that
obviously
phrase,
the father had intimations of that.
Yeah, and since that heart is obviously animated and governed by a demon not granted to all men, is that demon heavenly or Faustian? That's his dad.
Yeah.
And there's only so many of those things, I think, that a sympathetic Marxist or Marxist biographer can shrug off. I mean, there's just so many statements like that from him and people about him and people who knew him, and loved ones, and a wife, a son, a best friend from Engels, and then the different writings. Whew.
Okay, so let's attack this.
Now, was he a Satanist, right?
Well,
that is a whole different thing that I can't personally answer.
Well, it seems not unreasonable to presuppose that he was a devotee of the Mephistophelian ethos.
Yeah, I think that's
right. So
really
the question is, what constitutes a Satanist? Well, someone who generates a murderous doctrine, that raises questions. I mean, dead serious about that. Like
right.
The most murderous doctrine ever promoted in the roughly Judeo-Christian context by a large margin. So I would say it's incumbent on those who would defend him to describe why we wouldn't just assume that. But the part of the reason that I was so interested in talking to you was because I felt that what you documented in your book was extraordinarily telling from the psychological perspective, because I know how these things work. And it is not something that can be overlooked, that was his favorite quote.
Right.
I mean, especially not when you understand Goethe's centrality in the German intellectual tradition. That's like having a favorite quote from Shakespeare, right? And it's not any old quote. It's the central credo of Mephistopheles. So that's extraordinarily telling. Now, I do have another.
Can I give you a...
Yes.
So Robert Payne, the very serious academic, no right-winger, British man of letters, the guy who really broke this first in his 1968 biography of Marx, all right? His chapter where he talks about this stuff is called The Demons. in his Marx biography. Now, he wrote this, and I'm not saying that I endorse this. As an academic, I can't say if this is correct. There were times when Marx seemed to be possessed by demons. That's what Paine wrote. And now this I would at least more endorse. Marx had the devil's view of the world and the devil's malignity. Sometimes he seemed to know that he was accomplishing works of evil. I think that gets closer to it. Now, Pastor Richard Wurmbrand, who wrote the famous book Tortured for Christ, and was tortured for Christ in Romanian prisons by communist captors who were shouting, "I am the devil," while they were torturing him. He did a book called Marx and Satan. He's convinced that Marx was a Satanist and did some things ritualistically that it might have even been satanic. But I can't say that. I can't endorse that.
But you see evidence of that in his play.
I've never seen,
in terms of at least his fantasies.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
In fact, Paine even goes so far as to say, Vladimir Lenin, right? There's a statement from Lenin which said, when I was a teen, I broke from all religion. I took the cross from my neck and I threw it in the rubbish bin. And Paine has a quote where, not Paine, Richard Wurmbrand, where I think he believes that Lenin even stomped on it. He says, well, that's a satanic ritual. I don't know. I don't know that it is or not. But there's another case of Lenin who at least did the work of the devil. I mean, Lenin had, according to Robert Conquest, W.H. Chamberlain, the first historian of the Russian Revolution, 500,000 people were killed from 1917 to 1923 under Lenin, not even including the Russian Civil War. If that's not the devil's work, I don't know what the hell is, right? But I think what Paine said in the latter quote, the devil's view of the world, the devil's malignity, and at the very least, this identification with kind of devilish-like destruction, right? Tearing everything down, rebelling against the world, everything that exists deserves to perish. That at least, and then the ideology that he created that just happened to be responsible for the deaths of over 100 million people in the 20th century, you know, more than World War I and World War II combined. So that ideology was pretty hellacious.
Yeah, to say the least. Okay, so, and I think it's very naive not to assume that the events that we described in Marx's life are not connected, right?
Yeah,
right.
Correct.
And that his economic polemics were somehow independent of his poetic imagination. It's like, obviously they weren't, because they wouldn't have had that motivational force. So they were calling on dark forces, obviously. So, because otherwise they wouldn't have compelled people in that manner, especially not toward that sort of immense sadistic murderousness and utter destructiveness.
And of course, get to the hatred of God, which all the communists did. So all the communists thereafter seek to ban religion.
Right. Atheists.
That's
right.
They're
not exactly atheists, because they're trying to stomp something out.
That's right. It's not
a neutrality.
That's right. It's not a neutrality toward religion. It's not irreligion. It's not separation of church and state. It is militant, aggressive atheism. Trotsky and Lenin create the League of the Militant Godless.
Right.
They ban religion. They have the Moscow church trials. They blow up churches. They jail priests, right? The Solzhenitsyn writes in the Gulag Archipelago, they put nuns in special sections of the Gulag with prostitutes.
Yes, right.
Deem them whores to Christ.
Absolutely.
Lenin said, all worship of a divinity is a necrophilia. There is nothing more abominable than religion.
Yeah.
So they don't just try to stop religion. They want Pol Pot, the Buddhist monks in Cambodia, to renounce their vows, to marry. It's not enough for them to be quiet. And so after 4 years, I don't
know how you can separate a militantly anti-religious atheism from especially, say, within a Christian context, from something approximating satanic ideology, because I don't see how conceptually that separation is possible. It's one thing to be atheist in the manner that leaves people to go to hell in a handbasket in their own way, but to be actually an enemy of the religious enterprise, that's a whole different thing.
It is.
So, and that obviously Marx and the communists were obviously that, clearly, obviously.
And Satan might say, I don't care if you believe in me or not, you're doing my work, man. I mean, they're shutting down churches, blowing up churches.
That also touches on the issue of what it means to believe, right? And I mean, you could imagine someone comparatively harmless who toys with ritualistic satanic activities in a sort of dramatic manner. And then you could imagine someone who tortures nuns and priests and burns down churches, but forgoes any technical affiliation with Satan.
Right.
I would say that the latter is the Satanist in a much deeper sense than the former.
That's
Not
right.
that what the former is doing is excusable.
Yeah, or at least satanic.
Yes, right. But to do what the communists did to the religious enterprise is evidence of something far more militant than a mere atheism.
You can't make this stuff up. I dare you to even try. Okay? Are you starting to see the thesis of The Devil in Us, a memoir of you and me now? The devil has never been our enemy. Not our friend, but not our enemy. Okay? The devil is essentially the deity given the physical realm. Okay? This is the deity given the physical realm. Human beings cannot co-opt the power of a deity. And this is what the Satanists are trying to do. Co-opt the power of the deity. But when you understand that Satan is the ruler of this physical realm, it means he is responsible for every atom in creation. Every physical atom that produces a manifest result in the physical creation. Satan would use the current of the Creator coming through the dimensions to ultimately create this reality. Now, this reality has been worked on by extraterrestrial races, specifically the sentient hominid on the planet, ergo us. But when you understand Satan in the uncorrupted way, Satan is not pleased when rivers are toxified, when forests are clear-cut, when we abuse and defile this world. Okay? You could even, I suppose, no, Balzac, I'm doing a podcast, buddy. You could also make the case that seriously, you're just going to come right up on the desk like this. Okay. Lost my train of thought there. Sorry. I get into this zone, and if my concentration is broken, it's broken. So Satan is the ruler of this domain, and that has to be respected, okay? It cannot be disrespected. It's not to be worshipped, but if you take physical form for the benefit of spiritual maturation, because the physical form is where you can accomplish the most spiritual work, because the rational mind allows you to contextualize things in a way that are much more difficult to do on the other side until you've become awakened and your being exists and can be directed independent of this mental force. Okay? Wow, there's a lot going on here. So the event horizon and the satanic nature of communism is well known. There was a Romanian pastor who wrote a book. I forget the title of it. I went through the whole book on another radio show I did a number of years ago on a radio station. And I believe that Marx and Satanism is the title of the book. I should look it up, but I'm not going to waste our time doing that right now. But you need to understand that we're dealing with profoundly satanic forces here. Much of Judaica has been infected by this satanic spirit. Not in its totality. So it is, again, I have to constantly say this, it's not the Jews, but it's Jewish. Okay, it's more than Jewish now. I mean, if communism is satanic, it has spread into the Buddhist world, the Taoist world, in the form of communism in China. And they give the example in the video of Pol Pot in Cambodia, which was also a largely Buddhist nation. Okay, so God has many expressions. You can't say one is right and the other is wrong. Okay, this is another mistake we're making. Okay, all the infighting amongst religions, Christians fighting with Muslims and Muslims fighting with Christians, and Christians and Muslims saying that Buddhism and Hinduism is evil and demonic and satanic. It isn't. This, what I'm explaining, is what Satanism is. And if we don't come to a universal understanding of what spiritual expression is, we're not going to make this bell curve in our evolution. I'm sorry to tell you. Okay? In fact, I have serious doubts we're going to make it anyways. This doesn't mean the human race will be wiped out, but it's going to be something like a massive rollback, like the flood. Now, this can still be avoided. We're in the 11th hour, but it can still be avoided. It doesn't have to happen. It depends on how we perceive the reality and how we cooperate with each other. But honestly, I have my doubts. And the reason I have my doubts is that for this to be successful, for this human enterprise that battles these anti-human forces, we have to be spiritually connected. And there's a lot of people that are dogmatically connected, as you can see in the Islamic marches in London and Toronto and New York now. They're connected to their dogma, but that's not a spiritual connection, and they don't understand the force that they're fighting. Because the very people they're attacking could be their allies when the real battle reveals itself. And the real battle is and always has been against these forces I describe in The Devil in Us. Every other conflict you think you have is a misdirection, a ruse, and a deception by an enemy that is a master of warfare. So masterful at warfare that they can commence their campaign with no boots on the ground and just through mental manipulation get us to kill each other before they come in with the kill blows to take us all out. This is how pathetic the human race has become now. It's absolutely pathetic. I don't know what else to describe it as. Let's take another little reading from the Event Horizon chapter.
The remaining question, if we take this speculative theory to its full limit, is what is being exchanged? If we're getting technology, what are they getting? What is it that the human race has to offer races that are beyond us technologically? Do you think they like Himalayan salt? And what happens to us if we've gone into space? What does that mean for the whole terrestrial-bound human race? For lack of a clearer footprint in language, what does it do to our karmic relationship with our reality? What is the new reality of exchanges we exist within? And most importantly, why is nobody telling us? Do you really think for a minute that the intelligence agencies of the world, at least in the first world, CIA, Mossad, MI6, XIS, ASIS, DGSE, don't know what's happening at the Mother of Darkness castle? Do you really for a minute believe that the senior politicos and the senior money people in every major nation don't understand what's going on in this subculture? Do you really believe for a minute that all of the major industries that contribute to the perception of reality in the West are not somehow involved in this subculture of Satanism and ritual sacrifice? We are living in hell. You don't have to wait till you die to go there anymore. In typical Western efficiency, they've brought it to our front door, Uber hell, delivered on time or free. The final economy of man is the spiritual economy. It begins at the mnemonic body and goes all the way to the soul. The mnemonic body is that part of us that contains all the memories. These memories go far beyond our physical life. Beyond these memories is a vast region of mind that we can call the universal mind, and once apprehended and incorporated into our consciousness would become universal beings. Beyond this identity is God. It's almost pointless to talk about this because it has no tangible qualities or conceptual qualities or sensual qualities, although it's all of these things. All these things would not exist without the spiritual identity because it's the energy source and seed form of all the other bodies which project us right into the physical world. But basically we can say that there are 5 major bodies of man and each has its own economy. The final body of man, the soul, really doesn't have an economy because it has no needs other than to be realized, but that need for realization takes place within a physical body, so we get the idea of economy. At a certain point we're going to have to allocate part of our resources to discovering who and what we are. In the present historical record this has been done by renunciates. A renunciate is a person who turns their back on the first two economies of food, water, shelter, and procreation and goes and lives in a more solitary way with minimal food and minimal material possessions in pursuit of these realizations. This is how our spiritual economy begins. No, I don't want to get into a big theological debate here about whether we live once or we live many times. The truth is we live many times. It's always been this way, and every religion knows this. The Jews are starting to talk about it now in the rabbinical circles, and they give reasons for why it was withheld for the last X number of centuries. The Christians had it taken from their teachings in the Council of Nicaea and 535 AD. Like most things in the Christian world, this was deliberately done to control the population. The Muslims never had a concept of reincarnation. Everybody else on the planet has had some form of understanding of reincarnation. I bring this up in context to economy because it explains why not everybody has the need to fulfill a spiritual economy in every life, and why it's only a small portion of the human race that goes off in any given generation and practices this final economy. It used to be that the practitioners of this spiritual economy were the leaders of a society. We used to call them shaman or medicine men. They ruled alongside a chief who was responsible for the physical survival of the tribe and the state of the tribe in conflict or warfare. In the more advanced civilizations like our Western civilization, we turned all of this over to institutions. Our final economy, the spiritual economy, gave birth to the first institution in the Western world, the Vatican. Now, whatever you think of Jesus Christ is your business. I personally think he is one of the most remarkable people in the human record, and I try my best to live to the edicts of the Gospels. The first organized spiritual economies took place in the ancient world. They were all part of sequestered and secretive institutions. We see this in Sumeria, Babylon, Egypt, and Israel, which separated its priests into various responsibilities related to the temple. Now, the irony, or inversion, of man is that most of what we call predation takes place in the dimension just beyond the physical, what we're calling in this text the sensory or sensual economy or the astral economy. This is where most of the very negative stuff is, and where most of what we call energy harvesting, entity botherance, entity association, and entity possession takes place. In our arrogance, we don't admit this. We bottle this entire phenomenon up in the medical science of psychiatry and in rich pharmaceutical companies that narcotize these poor people to near unconscious states. The Industrial Revolution separated our spiritual and scientific communities, and in the area of consciousness, this was a huge mistake.
So there you go. Another section from the Event Horizon chapter. So some interesting things are asked in that section. Can you really believe that the intelligence agencies are not aware of the blood ritual? I find it extremely specious to suggest that they're unaware. Why don't they stop it? What's going on? What do we not know that they know? Have they all become evil? Or is there something that we're not being told? I don't think I have an answer to that question. I mean, I could speculate, but speculation is kind of stupid in a topic this serious. But it would be absolutely ridiculous to believe for a moment that the CIA, MI6, and the various intelligence agencies do not have an understanding of what's going on at the Mother of Darkness Castle, which was referenced in the Blood chapter, one of the darkest places on the planet. Again, this is what Ronald Bernard was getting to, okay? So this is an example of interdimensional exchange, okay? We are, just as we eat meat, there are things that consume our energies, that consume our psychic energies in the form of worship and in the form of terror. The two polarities on the astral, okay? The great affection and the great fear. And many of the gods that have been put before us are simply parasites, okay? And very few of the gods are actually helping us. Most of them are parasitic because they live in the dual worlds above us, but the dual worlds nonetheless, and they require energy, just as we require energy, just as we die if we don't eat food, we starve to death. Just as we die if we don't drink water, we dehydrate. There's a regiment to maintaining the body. There's a regiment to maintaining the astral body. It's not limitless. It's not the soul. It's not your final form. It can live much longer than a physical body, but it's not your final form. So this is what we entered into, and as near as I can tell, we formally entered into these relationships in 1947. And we did so by inviting these races in, by giving them no choice but to come and see what was going on planet Earth when we detonated the atomic weapons, because that was a weapon that communicated to more than one dimension, and therefore we suddenly became a problem. For example, human beings can live quite comfortably with the existence of, let's say, ants. Okay? The ants don't bother you. You don't bother the ants. The ants are doing what the creation wants them to do, what they were created to do. But if you open your cupboard one day and you have an infestation of ants, you have to deal with that, because they're going to get into your food, they're going to get into your cutlery, they're going to get into your plates, your glasses. You're going to have to deal with that. And what are you going to do probably? Well, you're going to lay out some sort of ant-killing remedy, borax and salt or something like this. We became the problem ant in the galactic cupboard when we started blowing nuclear weapons, and corrective measures were taken. It's that simple, okay? The Satanists are communicating with extraterrestrials. They think they're communicating with demons, but they're not. They think they're communicating with Lucifer, but they're not. They're being gamed. They're being psyoped. At the top levels, there is consciousness of the fact that this is an extraterrestrial event. And again, I have to revisit this topic because so many people have problems with this topic. For whatever reasons, I don't know, but they do. Okay? Extraterrestrials do not need to physically travel 100 or 1,000 light years. There are other means of circumventing the distance. Remember, on the inside, we are faster than light. Spirit is faster than light. The physical light, which defines our physical reality, which defines what a light year is, okay, which is the distance that physical light can travel in 1 year. Physical light is relegated to the physical environment. The human spirit is finer than light. Therefore, it is faster than light, and it is part of the connective tissue to everything in creation. So this is the participatory element of quantum entanglement. We as a consciousness unit can go out and experience, if you want to, I don't recommend it per se, but if you want to, you can go and visit other planets just in your consciousness, just in a meditative state. Okay? How do you think the Buddha was able to describe the many classes of life form that he encountered? The devas and all of these sorts of things. How do you think that Muhammad was able to define what the jinn were? He did it internally. Okay? He saw them, he was awakened, or he was told about them by his guides. It's better that you have your own direct experience rather than take counsel from guides, because that is a form of infantilization. Okay? And this has been a big part of the human spiritual practice, is this infantilization of constantly being spoon-fed by extraterrestrials, whether they be Palladian, Andromedan, or what have you. It's time for us as a species to step into our potential. So what is the event horizon as a psycho-spiritual event? It is the revealing of this negativity and the unfolding of this satanic plan, which begins around 1880 and is being done by the secret societies, largely led by the dark Kabbalists, who are migrating now to the Third Temple. And what they want to do is take over the world in what they call a satanic system. But it's not even satanic, okay? Satan himself would not dismiss your right to worship the Creator and to interact with the Creator. Satan does. Why would he deny you the same right? Okay? So it's not satanic per se. This is about the destruction of the human race, the incapacitation of the human race, and the defilement of the human race. And they're coming right out and talking about it now. This absolutely vile catamite from Israel, Yuval Harari, I believe his name is, the right hand of Klaus Schwab, now I suppose the right hand of Schwab's daughter, who, if the news reports are accurate, is taking over the World Economic Forum. He's this guy you've seen out on the podcast saying, the human beings are a hackable animal. Free will is an illusion. In his Israeli accent, his pig Yiddish accent, because that's not real Hebrew they speak in Israel, okay? The Hebrews are gone, okay? Get that through your head. The Hebrews are gone. Whoever they were, they're gone. This race that's in there now, internally, is not the Jews. Most of those people, in Israel now, if you were to do DNA testing, they are not connected to the original Hebrew tribes at all. They're something else. They're a mutation, a morphing. But Yuval Harari is just coming out and telling us that we're a hackable animal. They've initiated a death wish in the human beings by constantly entraining us to believe we're bad for the last 3 or 4 decades through this climate change bullshit and all of these programs, which are really negative reinforcement or enforcement for our suicide as a species. This accounts for the very low birth rates in Japan and the United States and Canada and elsewhere. It's all part of this programming, okay? And it's all nonsense and it's all bullshit. This has to be woken up to. It has to be woken up to fairly quickly because we're at the 11th hour now. So what can you do in the event horizon? What can you do with that dull leaden feeling you have in your solar plexus, or you might have in your solar plexus, when you read The Devil in Us, a memoir of you and me? And I'm not going to apologize for making you feel that way. It's like I say in the opening page of the Event Horizon chapter. Fuck you for being asleep at the spiritual wheel of your life, because your unconsciousness is being equitized and capitalized upon by these pseudo-Satanists or these negative extraterrestrial worshippers. Okay? So you're being used. You can't be neutral now, because the game is at the level of consciousness now. You may think you're neutral, smoking weed, playing video games all day, jacking off to internet porn, and not doing anything. You may think you're neutral, but you're not neutral. You've become an occupied consciousness. You're being used by the negative forces, okay? You have to stand up. Now that feeling, what I would do with it, and this is what I did with it when I encountered it, I offer it to the Creator. I say, this is my prayer. This, what you feel here based on what I'm witnessing and what I've become aware of going on amongst this beloved human race, which I'm a part of, it makes me feel very bad here. I'm offering these feelings to you, Creator, so that you may return them in a greater understanding for me. Okay? So you're going to have these uncomfortable feelings. If you think you have the right to live in a domain of constant stimulation and pleasure, watching TV, watching movies, playing video games, getting high and escaping the reality that you're living in, you are sorely mistaken, and you're not standing up as a soldier of light in this final epic battle. Okay? This is the return of the King, and the King is us in our natural spiritual sovereignty, and it has to be universal. He gets it. It has to be universal. It has to be all of us. It has to be the West. It has to be Asia. It has to be the Middle East. It has to be all of us. This is what we're up against. This is the trial before us now. Okay? It's no small thing. Got some kind of an animal issue going on here. I have my camera working so it automatically fixes me to the center. This is the genius of the iPhone continuity camera. I just absolutely love it. I love technology, but what can I say? So the beauty of this is your spiritual awakening, which will be horrible at first. You will come to realize at a deeper level the things I write about in The Devil in Us. Okay? But once those things are digested, remember, trauma is undigested consciousness. So once those things are digested, you're going to be a much stronger being. See this as a spiritual puberty. Remember how terrifying puberty was? The hormonal changes, the desires you don't understand, and wondering if you're the only person in the world going through this, how personal it was for you, how isolated you become as a result of going through puberty. That's an initiatory experience at the biological level. You go from a non-reproductive human to a reproductive human. It's the same thing with this, but it's all internal. It's not chemical. You have to engage the internal light. You have to engage the divine. You have to engage the creator. Okay? This is the only way out of this. And if you haven't been able to get it voluntarily, well, now you're getting it through the negative stimuli, which is if you don't wake up, you're going to be consumed. And you're going to be consumed physically and probably astrally. And you're going to suffer a very negative fate. Okay? It may be an indeterminate period of time before you get another human form again. And that is the form you need to transcend. So all the motivation is in front of you right now, which is why all the distraction is here as well. Which is why they've introduced all of this extremely toxic stuff into our lives. I believe that these challenges are surmountable. I believe that we can win this. You may call me optimistic, you may call me a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And I think this is survivable, okay? I think that we could turn this system around, these systems around. The banking and refinancing of societies would be fairly simple. The end of this globalist agenda, which is the seat of power for these pseudo-Luciferians, these pseudo-Satanists, okay? They can be removed and destabilized very easily, okay? They're not that powerful. And a lot of their support on the other side is gone now. Their ranks have been decimated on the astral. Okay, we have been helped already spiritually. So it's really a battle that's taking place at the physical right now. And the Creator is here operating as well. Okay, and ready to engage anybody whose heart is open and who can do it. Now, this is the prediction we're in. This is the predicament we're in, okay? This is the Event Horizon, Part 3. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.